All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our June virtual luncheon for WREA. To begin, I'd like to ask Robin Fisher from Newmark and from Blaise, also the REBNY Young Professional of the Year, to give today's invocation. Robin.
Unmute, got it. Okay. First, I want to thank Laura and the board for their exceptional work during these truly difficult circumstances. Their spirit and creative initiatives around programming are sincerely appreciated by all of us. As we approach the mid-mark of 2020, we must embrace our new role of navigating a dynamic of colossal uncertainty. This uncertainty is routed in two powerful enemies: our fear of the unknown and our hate for that we feel will not change. Centuries of social injustice have set the stage for a serious and complicated conversation in America, and there is no clean or simple solution. To have a chance of overcoming the racist undertones that plague our society, we need to stop being so black and white. Despite the irony, we must accept that there are no absolutes. The injustice embodied by George Floyd's murder that has been suffered by generations must be rectified. But retaliation in the form of violence and destruction are never the answer. We must be thoughtful and ready to have uncomfortable conversations with each other, as well as our current and future representatives. The humanitarian and economic crisis left in the wake of the coronavirus has highlighted deep, long-standing wounds within our society. In truth, the racial disparities are much more pervasive and toxic than the virus. New York has done a great job slowing the spread of COVID-19, and effective treatments and a vaccine are certainly on the horizon. We must be patient and focus on the opportunity to reset social standards and create a stronger and more diverse community. As New Yorkers, it is our responsibility to be at the forefront of building an environment of equal opportunity. We are the greatest and most resilient city in the world. We must set the example. It has definitely been a bleak few months, but please remember that our best days are ahead of us. We must be active, vocal, and supportive. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. I know that activism is a recurring theme in today's program, so with that, Laura, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Robin. So now we would like to recognize our former chairmen that are in the Zoom room today. Please rise when your name is called and imagine a stadium full of applause. Dennis Carr, Andy Roos, Nikki Hurriet, Brian Waterman, Greg Schenker, Bill Montana, Rob Fink, Jonathan Tutel, Lindsay Ornstein, and Lenny Lazzarino. So Caroline, before you go over our upcoming events, there's one I want to mention personally. Next Tuesday at 6 p.m., we have my personal favorite trainer, Joseph D., who's a former dancer for Beyonce, Madonna, and J-Lo. He's going to give us his famous kickboxing and training class via Zoom. So I assure you, I used to have to get to the gym 20 minutes early just to wait online for his class. It'll be a really amazing class. And as a Black man and a gay man, Joseph has a lot to share with us and continues to find ways to motivate us. So even if you just want to try the workout, just join, and it'll be a really uplifting way to spend time together. And all money raised from the class will go directly to charity. So Caroline, what events are coming up?
Thanks, Laura. Before I mention the upcoming events, I want to thank everyone who participated in our first ever virtual game night last week. Special thanks to Will Conrad and Elizabeth Ugetta, who coordinated the event. It was a lot of fun, and we will definitely be planning another one this summer. We will continue to host our quarantine happy hour events on Thursday nights at 5 p.m. with a guest bartender. So definitely encourage you to join. It's open to members and applicants, and you can catch up with everyone as well as learn how to make a great cocktail. Also, we've launched our new expanded mentorship program run by James Nelson, and we'll be matching 17 master program students with YMWREA members. We have 3 virtual events scheduled to start a week from this Thursday, with a presentation by Rhodes Associates on navigating the job market in uncertain times. All members are welcome to join, and we'll be sending details out shortly. At the end of the month, we will be hosting a conversation with David Dishy of L&M Development. Again, we'll be sending e-invites shortly, and you'll be able to submit any questions you have for him when you register. This summer and into the fall, we have some really exciting events scheduled as well. We are still planning to host our annual blood drive, tentatively scheduled for late July. Additionally, our new member class of 2019 will be hosting a virtual poker game on September 17th. And this event will raise funds for one of our favorite charitable partners, Operation Backpack. Additionally, we are planning an arts and culture event at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we hope to be able to host this in person sometime this fall. And lastly, please be sure to mark your calendars for our golf and tennis outing that will be hosted on Tuesday, October 6th at Fresh Meadow Country Club. If you have any questions about upcoming events, please reach out to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. Before we get to today's speakers, we would like to address the recent tragic events that have been unfolding around our country. The deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor should not have happened, period. Black Lives Matter. We would like to observe a moment of silence in their honor. Racial injustice has led to rage and frustration stemming from decades of intolerance and lack of change. As an organization, the WREA has a diversity group that had already been focused on bringing diversity to our membership. We're committed to inclusion of all races, genders, orientations, ages, religions, and identities throughout our membership and in our programming. And now we challenge our members to do more, to listen, to speak up, to seek out diverse candidates to join WREA, and to really make a difference. I've been in a lot of conversations where people are asking, what can I do and how can I help? This weekend, I was speaking with WREA Beck, a community activist and trustee of the Community Coalition on Race, and asked her to come share her thoughts with us. WREA, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for including me today. I won't take up too much of your time, only a few minutes. As Laura said, that I am a trustee with the Community Coalition on Race, which is a 40-year-old organization based in South Orange and Maplewood. It's one of the largest racial justice and civil rights organizations and oldest civil rights organizations in New Jersey. So I'm very honored to be a trustee there. I live in South Orange with my husband and my 12-year-old daughter. I'm also a community activist, sort of a suburban rabble-rouser. And the reason that Laura and I started talking about this is because over the weekend I was featured on Good Morning America because I had organized some protest work with some white allies of mine who staged a die-in at the intersection of South Orange Avenue downtown to protest the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Tony McDade. They lay in the street for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, during which time they chanted the names of other people who had been murdered at the hands of law enforcement and other extrajudicial forces. So it was quite meaningful, and Good Morning America picked up the story, and I think it's on their Twitter page if you guys are interested to go look at it. What I want to say is that it's obvious that our country is at an inflection point. And more every day we see ordinary Americans finally attempt to grapple with racial injustice and what a future built on racial solidarity might look like. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that as realtors, y'all have a really big role to play in how we make that future. Realtors create communities by bringing families together. Those families go to school together, they shop together, they worship together, they play together. And so my offer to you is to think about how in your personal and in your professional life, you can help go about building what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. It might come as a surprise to you, but New Jersey is one of, I think, only 4 states that explicitly prohibits segregation in its state constitution. But unfortunately, we live with the legacy of redlining, and in New Jersey, New Jersey is the 5th most segregated state for Black children in the country. we are more segregated, our children are more segregated in New Jersey than every other state in the south of the Mason-Dixie line in 2020. That's incredible to contemplate. So how do you as realtors and how do we as community activists and Americans work together to change that reality? I think to help answer that question would be a real gift to our collective future. I want to tell the story because I know this all sounds super overwhelming. I want to tell the story, a story of something that actually happened to me about 2 years ago that has really stayed with me. It is a story about how actually easy it is to be a white ally and an anti-racist. I was driving to pick my daughter up from gymnastics, and I was driving to Union, New Jersey, which is always crowded. It was late at night. It was about 8:30. Her practice gets out. My daughter's a competitive gymnast. And I attempted to make a left, and there was a man in an SUV too close to me, and I nicked the window, the rear view mirror, the side mirror, sorry, of his car. He became irate and followed me to the parking lot at the gymnastics place and got out of the car and insisted that he had to call the police. I mean, it was just a nick. He literally could have pressed it together and fixed it himself, but I understand it was my fault, which I did not deny. I admitted it was my fault, but it was clear that it wasn't anything that needed to involve the police. And obviously, as a 42-year-old who lives in this body, my relationship with the police has been somewhat fraught. So I was very concerned. Unbeknownst to me, another mom whose son attends the same gymnastics center witnessed the exchange. And instead of going in to pick up her son and just minding her business, she got out of her car, came up to the driver's side window of my car and said to me, "I'm just gonna stay here with you until the police come. I'm just gonna stand here with you." And when she did that, the man who was so angry came to his senses. And I think he realized that because she was going to stand there and bear witness to what actually happened, that he was making a fool of himself. And so he fixed his mirror, he got back in his car, and he drove away. All because she said, "I'm just gonna stand here with you and wait." That little moment of discomfort for her, where she was 10 minutes late, she wasn't sure what was going on. She had, this man was clearly very upset. We did not know how he was going to react. That very little thing that she did, who knows what kind of impact that could have had on my life. And I don't mean that in a hyperbolic way, right? I absolutely was in the wrong. I had no problem exchanging insurance information. What I was afraid of was being yelled at and screamed at by someone over, something that would have cost maybe $5 to fix. I mean, there was no actual damage to the person's car. I don't know why I'm getting caught up on that. But the fact of the matter is, her standing with me made a huge difference. And so as we think about how we can be in better partnership and better allyship with each other, it's really those small steps. It's really taking ourselves out of our personal comfort zone that can sometimes have the biggest impact. And that is all we have been asking as Black and Brown Americans for the last 4 centuries, right? And that is all I am encouraging you all to think about today. Of course, this month is also Pride. As Laura mentioned, our favorite trainer is an out gay Black man who speaks very openly about the bias incidents that he's faced in his lifetime. And we have to be grateful, though, that we live in a time and a place in Northern New Jersey where gay folks and LGBT folks can be out, raise their families, buy homes, have good jobs, have access to health care. We've really come a long way. But again, it's all about intersectionality. We can't think about that progress without thinking of people like Stormy DeValier, who was the Black lesbian who was the first person to throw, the brick at Stonewall that resulted in the Stonewall riots. We can't forget about people like Little Richard, who helped invent the modern rock and roll that we all love and enjoy. We can't forget about people like Bayard Rustin, who was actually the mentor who introduced the tactic of nonviolence to Dr. Martin Luther King, while he was thinking about what was the best way to impact the civil rights movement. Bayard Rustin was an out gay man, Black man in the 1950s. Without people like that, there would be no pride. And I say that to say that we too are part of America. We have always been part of America. We've always been contributors in America, and we will continue to do that work if you all will join us. I will send to Laura a couple really amazing books. The New York Times actually just did a feature on Saturday saying that 9 out of the 10 best-selling books right now in the country are books about race and anti-racism, and on it are 2 of my favorites. I'll make sure that you all have links. One is by an incredible white anti-racist activist. Her name is Robin DiAngelo. She has written some really great stuff, but this book in particular, I think, is a very easy primer. And the other book is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, who is a scholar and activist. So again, thank you for your time. The question before us all, and the question before you as talented realtors who help build communities every day. Without you, none of us would be in our beautiful homes, is how do we work together to build a more just, diverse community that prepares us for America's future. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure I speak for many, but we stand with you and really appreciate you sharing that story.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you again for inviting me to talk with you all today. Enjoy your luncheon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speakers, Helena Durst and Tom Bowe. After their presentation, they'll be available for Q&A, so you can enter questions in the chat feature in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Helena Durst started her career in commercial leasing in the early aughts for Durst. On April 1st, 2010, she became president of New York Water Taxi, transforming it from a subsidized ferry company to a profitable tour travel operator, and finally selling the asset to Circle Line in 2016. In 2016, the Durst organization opened Via, EOS, and Frank, tripling the amount of residential units. Helena became principal in charge of residential leasing and operations. She'll be opening Sven in 2021 to increase the Durst unit count to over 3,000 units in New York City. Helena is passionate about New York City parks and is co-chair of the New York Restoration Project. She's continually learning and evolving from the people around her, especially her 4- and 7-year-old sons. And now to introduce Tom. As Executive Vice President of Commercial Leasing for Durst, Tom Bowe oversees the leasing of the company's 1.3 million square foot commercial portfolio. Since joining Durst in 1992, Tom negotiated and secured leases in excess of 12 million square feet. Most recently, he guided the 1 million square foot Condé Nast at One World Trade Center and oversaw leasing for the 2.1 million square foot Bank of America Tower, which was 98% leased when it opened. The 51-story Bank of America Tower is the world's most environmentally responsible high-rise office building with a LEED Platinum rating. Prior to joining Durst, Tom worked at Cushman & Wakefield for 5 years. So please join me in welcoming Helena and Tom.
Laura, thank you so much, and the entire WREA board, thank you for inviting Tom and I today, and especially thank you for the moving statement by WREA. I really appreciate it. And Robin, I thought you did an excellent job. So Laura, thank you so much for putting this all together. And for those interested later, I'd be happy to tell folks about my slight Nick story where somebody definitely took on some privileges and may have stalked me following. So people in cars can definitely lose their mind. I am a New York City history buff, and New York City has experienced many periods of this type of disruption. And this city especially has a way of bouncing back better, safer, and more inclusive. In recent history, there is a trend of successful generational real estate families that give to New York City by being good corporate citizens and starting philanthropic and cultural endeavors. The Rudins are well known for sponsoring the New York City Marathon. The Roses are active in both the Natural History Museum and Lincoln Center. My own family's philanthropic activities include being active in New York City parks, as well as being in support of the Osborne Association, which supports people impacted by today's social justice system. My family is well known for our green development, and we support the Earth Institute in bringing awareness to climate change. Time and time again, we see New York City real estate philanthropy supports organizations focused on education, art, social, and criminal justice, the environment, and community organizations. At the same time, I recognize that as an industry and a city of people, we all need to do better in keeping each other accountable and doing more for marginalized neighborhoods. Family photo, please. My family is fortunate to work together. It is not easy. We fight occasionally, but we always respect each other. Oh, sorry, one more up. Laura, if you could just move it one more up, sorry, thanks. My family is fortunate to work together. It's not easy. We fight occasionally, but we always respect each other. We've learned to work together generationally with the philosophy and embodiment of leave no trace camping. That's right, as a family, we all go out in the woods together. Leave no trace camping is leaving your campsite better than you found it. We further developed our principles into values. Next slide, please. As well as being responsible for the leasing, design, and operations of the residential properties, I head our company culture. We established the following values from our family principles. We use these values in as many communications as possible, including our performance review for employees. We have full-day company retreats discussing the values. We bring it up at every holiday party and at every possible company communication. Our goal is to have our 1,200 employee population embody these principles in their jobs as much as possible. My family and hopefully everyone in the company uses these values in their day-to-day interactions. For a moment, I will talk about relationships. The value of relationships is seen in our relationships with our tenants and residents. Our goal is to renew rather than release space. And our relationship with the broker community is a point of pride for my family. My grandfather, Seymour, actually started some of the awards that REBNY does today. I was once a Young Men's Women's Real Estate Association board member, and I met some great friendships were developed through this group, and I've always been able to sip a glass of water now for 30 minutes and network. Next slide, please. Over the past decade, Durst built over 2,000 residential units. We built the distinguished Bjarke Ingels building that looks like a pyramid on 12th Avenue, known as VIA. We built a property on 6th Avenue and 30th Street called EOS with Nike at the base building, which is a fantastic mixed-use building with Nordstrom at the base. And in this past year, I focused my attention on opening 10 Howard's Point in Astoria, on the waterfront near Socrates Sculpture Park and Astoria houses. I just like to give a quick shout out for Queens, which has slowly become one of my favorite boroughs in that it's very inclusive, has some of the highest diversity rates, and the community there has been overwhelmingly accepting towards us. Today, when I'm not dealing with the human resources nightmare that is the coronavirus, I'm focusing on preparing to begin leasing our 1,000-unit building, Sven, which is at the base of the 59th Street Bridge in Queens. We look to open Sven in 2021. Sven is a fully amenitized building with a pool, large gym, library, party room, and these fancy color-changing lights, which are called view glass, which will allow for residents not to have those bothersome drapery. We are also in design for a 400-unit building north of the Benjamin Franklin Bridge that we expect to open in 2023. My brother Alexander, who is the head of the project development team, has been keeping me very focused on new acquisitions and continuing to expand our residential properties. I will now be handing it over to Tom for Tom to be able to go over our Durst commercial properties and talk more in depth about our plans there.
Okay, thank you, Helena, and thank you, WREA, and everybody for pulling this together today. Laura and I haven't worked together, but I'm going to be saying next a lot because I figured we'd put a few images up here so you don't have to just look at me the whole time. So let's go with the One World Trade. I'm going to focus on 4 properties. We have a 13 million square foot portfolio. Laura did say 1.3 earlier, but if we only had a 1.3, I would be not as busy, but thank you. So with the 13 million square foot portfolio, the largest of our buildings is One World Trade Center. In fact, it was 9 years ago this week that the Durst organization and the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey signed a joint venture. I think construction. The negotiated, sponsored, and executed with our Condé Nast. The building is still built, and with the responsibility of filling a 3 million square foot asset, we really set up an international campaign because it's the World Trade Center. We literally had brochures translated into dozens of languages, and we set out a very big campaign. It became apparent that during our leasing that, you know, we weren't getting the finance companies, we weren't getting law firms, but we were attracting technology tenants. And in fact, that is really where our focus has begun or has gone. Next slide. So the team basically in leasing the building, there were a lot of sea changes in terms of how buildings were being leased and developed. The leasing team set out, or the Durst set out to create an environment that fosters collaboration and creativity in a community of like-minded tenants. So in 2016, we started construction of the New York's first, call it, large building amenity, and that's One World Commons. And what we learned there, you'll see, has certainly been translated into the buildings we'll talk about later. Now One World Trade Center has become a destination for TAMI tenants. And in fact, earlier this year, MDC Partners leased a space for 199,000 square feet in the building. Next slide. The 64th floor is where our Sky Lobby is, and it also, next slide, is where our One World Commons is. So today, we like to think that One World Trade Center has the largest and most diverse TAMI community in all of New York, with 31 TAMI tenants, totaling 2.1 million square feet. Obviously, given the size of the building, there is no larger TAMI community in New York City. With the MDC transaction, we are now 93% leased with just 214,000 square feet of space available. Next slide. There are a lot of names here of tenants that are very young, certainly young TAMI tenants, from Orbitable Insight to ASAP to Augustus, which is what's it called? Artificial intelligence company, and many others. But you can clearly see where we're getting our tenants from. Next slide. Approximately 1/2 half of the space we have available is above the sky lobby, and about 1/2 of it is below the sky lobby. We do have full floors measuring about 40,000 square feet, and we have units that are pre-built. We have units that are raw that we can build. And we also have what we call Durst Ready floors. So what is Durst Ready? Durst Ready is sort of was created at One World Trade Center when we had a tenant went bankrupt, and literally we got their space back, negotiated to get it back fully furnished. And within 30 days, we had the space released. And we're like, wow, okay. So obviously there are a lot of tenants out there doing co-working and flexible space. We have zero interest in being in the, sorry about that. We have zero interest in being in the co-working business, but in the flexible space business, we have a lot of interest. So we've sort of taken pre-built space and actually furnished it, made it plug-in ready, so someone just has to bring their servers in to open up their spaces. So we've done that very well at One World Trade Center. We've also done it in the rest of our portfolio, and it's something that we are going to continue to do, especially in buildings where we have significant rollover. We've been pricing it at about a $15 premium to what a typical space would be. And we certainly are giving tenants flexibility in terms of term, et cetera. But it has helped us get tenants in who have grown in the portfolio already. But it just gives us another tool in leasing space today. And before the world is, before COVID-19 and sort of the collapse of, call it, co-working and flexible space business, our feeling has always been that tenants would rather have the relationship with the landlord and be able to, grow within the building or within the portfolio. And with a 13 million square foot portfolio, we certainly have the ability to have tenants grow, within the properties. Next slide. The spaces at One World Trade Center are very open. The floor plans, essentially they're column free. So the space works well for, creative tenants, open spaces. The spaces that we have available, we have asking rents that range from $75 a foot to about $92 a foot for the Durst Ready spaces. Downtown is handled by Eric Engelhardt, who's been working with the Durst organization for about 15 years, and Karen Kuznick, who's probably been with us for approximately 10. They are helped by a team with David Falk and Pete Shimkin and a few others who serve as our leasing agents downtown. Next slide, and next slide. So from One World Trade Center, we're going to take a trip uptown to 151. 151, next slide, is the building formerly known as the Condé Nast building, or formerly known as 4 Times Square. So if we hadn't, if Condé Nast hadn't moved downtown, we would have obviously fought hard for their renewal. But once they decided to go downtown, we really set our sights on this property and how to reposition literally at the time, right now it's a 20-year-old asset, but when we started to market it, it was about a 15, 16-year-old asset. Next slide. So we did a major renovation of the property. Next slide. And we've spent approximately $150 million repositioning again, right now a 20-year-old asset. There's a new lobby, new entrance, a new amenity floor, which we spent about $25 million on. When Condé Nast spent $20 million on their amenity floor on the 4th floor in opening in 1999, we thought that was an absurd amount of money, and we never dreamed we would spend more than that several years later. But it has proven to be a very big part of our leasing success at the building. We put in new elevators with destination dispatch cabs. We put in a new heating and chiller plant. Those plants often have 20-year lives, and it was time for a change. And since the building for a period of time was half occupied, it was a great time to do that. We put in a new BMS system, new core bathrooms, and we also wrapped the entire building with bollards. So this building butts One Bryant Park, and we had bollards around that building when we built it in 2008 and opened it. It was time to really create one super block, and we put the same security provisions around this block as well. Next slide. The cornerstone of our amenity offering at 151 was the Frank Gehry cafeteria that Conde left behind. As soon as Conde moved out, people were asking the Durst, what are you going to do with the cafeteria? And Douglas quickly said, we're going to keep the cafeteria in some fashion. So everything on the floor, a 45,000 square foot floor, was demolished except for the seating areas, which you see here, of the Condé Nast. We renovated these dramatically, but we put in new wood flooring, a new covering the banquettes. We got rid of titanium clad walls and curved areas and made it much lighter and brighter. Next slide. And we also created a artisanal food hall, which is run by Charlie Palmer. Helena and other members launched this brand. We had opened it as Well, and it's now Well and by Durst. But we basically are strategic partners on our amenity spaces. At 151, we have Charlie Palmer, who runs.
Tom,
Lounge
you're breaking up a little bit. I think it's interesting to note with our amenity partners and thinking about what's going to be happening with the restaurant and retail industry as a whole. We're fortunate in one way that we don't have a lot of retail, but we're going to being able to reposition that for amenity use and working specifically with Charlie Palmer, who we've had a long tenant relationship with, and now we'll continue that tenant relationship in our amenity space. Sorry, I wanted to just break in. Thanks, Tom.
No problem. And if I'm breaking up, let me know, because obviously I don't want everybody to listen to not that I know what I can do about it, but thank you. The amenity, let's go to the next slide. So having these tools or these amenities in the building have really helped us lease space. I can say that NASDAQ, when they agreed to move their headquarters from downtown to 4 Times Square, which also at the time housed their market site, that was a big move, and the amenity floor was a big part of that. BMO Capital Markets, who's agreed to move from 3 Times Square across the street to our building, the amenity center, was a big part of that. Most recently, and over the COVID-19 period, we've signed a lease for 230,000 square feet with TikTok. So we were fortunate enough to date to really have one of the largest tenants, one of the largest leases signed during this period. And it was a project we had started in December, and we had the lease out before COVID-19 hit. And ironically, I mean, there are certain companies that continue to thrive in this type of an environment. I can tell you that TikTok certainly is one of them. I know that they got at least one more download from me during this break, but it really has rounded out the leasing at the building and given us a true, call it technology tenant. We're very big at the building with respect to fintech, with NASDAQ, with HedgeServe, and SSNC. Next slide. So we now have about a 325,000 square foot block of space left on floors 34 through 43. As you can see in the stack, there's a nice green terraced area on the 39th floor. To date, leasing at the building, we have outdoor space has helped us lease space to TikTok, BMO, NASDAQ, and RSM. That's basically 4 out of our 5 largest tenants have outdoor space. So those outdoor terraces have helped contribute to us leasing 77% of our space at the building. And we're really seeing this as a trend, so we're hoping that we can leverage one more significant commitment to the building by having the outdoor space. Next slide. This is a shot of what the 39th floor, behind it you can see the outdoor terrace, but this is a shot downtown and you can see what views this floor offers, and this is again on the 39th floor of the building. Next slide. We've certainly been targeting TAMI and creative type tenants. We created a nice rendering. This is not built, not a pre-built, not a Durst ready space, but the shot looking out of the southeast corner of the building at the Empire State Building is spectacular. Next slide. We also have about a 3,000 square foot terrace that will wrap around part of the south side of this floor as well as the east side. Unlike the terraces lower in the building, on the terraces in the upper part of the building, because their elevation is so high, we're going to put up a 6-foot glass barrier to really make these spaces usable. We did something similar to this at the top of 1155, which you'll see shortly. Next slide. So really creating an outdoor space that under almost any weather conditions you could be utilized, but whether it's daytime or twilight, your views from this area are spectacular. Next slide. So here are the views for the top of the house. So the next building, what we really tried to do at 151 and all of the next 2 buildings I'll be talking about as well is the Durst invested $150 million in this building. And essentially that is really taking a new building, but the idea is that tenants coming to the building and touring our large blocks of space have come from the Manhattan West, the Hudson Yards, the Trade Center, and next they're seeing our building. So when we look at renovating 151, our objective was really to raise it to a profile as close as we could get to One Bryant Park next door. I think that with the success that we've had for leasing at the building, certainly we've hit that. At the top of the building, the space that TikTok leased, we were asking $130 a foot for the top floor, $125 for the floors below that. With floors remaining, we have asking rents of $95 on the 24th floor to $105 to $115 in the tower, with a $10 premium for our terraced floor on 39. So we have hit numbers that certainly have not been seen in, aside from One Bryant Park, have really not been seen in that neighborhood, besides One Bryant Park and maybe 1095 Avenue of the Americas. So next building is 1155. As you can see at the profile of the building, at one of the big features of the building is the chamfered corners. At all four corners of the building, we installed 4 panels of floor-to-ceiling glass. So no matter where you are standing on the floors, you get this great visual of being able to have the floor-to-ceiling glass, which we certainly became accustomed to at One Bryant Park. And it really has, set sort of this building apart from other buildings on 6th Avenue. Next slide. So at 151, wrong building. At 1155, we've spent about $130 million at the building. That's about $173 a foot, since it's a 750,000 square foot building. But the leasing to date has been, has been very successful. The last 3 leases that we've signed at the building have also been tech tenants. So we really are looking at building the possible type of tenants in our Bryant Park community to include tech tenants. We signed a lease at the end of last year with Indeed for 2 floors, Indeed.com. Checkpoint, a security software company, as well as R3, which is a blockchain technology company. When we were leasing space next door at 1133, we also leased space to Take-Two Interactive and to Equinox, a cloud storage company, again showing that the technology tendency is really growing in this neighborhood. Next slide. We also renovated the lobby. So our renovations here were the lobby, the entrance, the plaza, new elevators, cabs, modernization, the floor-to-ceiling windows at all 4 corners of the building. We also replaced every casement window in the building. New life safety generator, new chiller and mechanical upgrades, BMS system, and bathrooms. So we've essentially really changed the building from top to bottom. People who have been here before, this used to house White and Case, and the lobby used to be black and white and Art Deco. So it doesn't look anything like that today. Next slide. This map really shows sort of our proximity, with 151 and 1155 to the Bryant Park community. If we filled in the other 2 buildings that we own here, it would be 1 Bryant Park at the corner of 42nd and 6th Avenue, as well as 1133, 1 block to the north. So we really have 4 properties that we like to say are in the Bryant Park North neighborhood. Next slide. So to date, we've had a very mixed, a very diverse type of tenancy at the building. Perkins & Coie is a 3-floor law firm. They were actually started with 3, they went to 4 floors. We have Chubb, who expanded from the building next door to 1133. We have BKD, an accounting firm. We have Verizon. We have several boutique financial services firms. Kobe Martin, a tenant of ours who grew to a full floor from next door. They started out at 3,000 square feet, and they happen to be a friend of Helena's from high school. So it's good to keep your friends close to you. Next slide. So we have several blocks. The light blue spaces are the blocks that we have available, and 2 of those blocks are anchored by outdoor space. The top of the building, which we're calling the Apex, we have 35 through 41. Could be 129,000 square feet. At the top of the building, we built an 8,000 square foot glass box, and that has a 4,000 square foot wraparound terrace on it as well. We'll see some slides momentarily. Right below that, we have a block from 28 to 32, which is about 83,000 square feet. And we have our marketing floor on 17, which we're now making available since we have another marketing floor up on 39. And at the end of the year, we get back a block of space where there's the largest terrace in our portfolio. That terrace is almost 7,000 square feet on the 7th floor. And that's about 105,000 square feet that's currently leased to Dow Jones. And that terrace is built. Next slide. This is one of our pre-built or furnished spaces that we have in the building, Durst Ready. So we have 2 of these in the building. We have a couple in the neighborhood at 114 West 47th Street. We have one coming off of a lease soon, and we're drawing a lease on another one that is suitable for a law firm. Next slide. So this is a shot. The photo is the actual shot. The part of the landscaping is photoshopped in, but this is the terrace on the 7th floor of the building. It's a great terrace for any time of the year. You can see all the way down to One World Trade Center. You see Bryant Park. Not a bad spot to view the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade from as well. Next slide. Going at the corner of 45th and 6th, this is looking back into the Chanford corner that faces to the north. And this terrace, as I said, wraps around 2 sides of the building and is our largest terrace in our portfolio. It is one of the first that we fully built out before the space became vacant. So last year we did have people watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade from this terrace. Most of those people were office brokers. I don't know how that happened, but just coincidence. Next slide. So going up to the top of the building, we created an 8,000 square foot block of space. We call it a pavilion. We wrapped it in view glass. View glass is something that Helena had mentioned that we're using at the Sven in Long Island City. But we wrapped around, it was the first application that we had. We wrapped it around the 13-foot panels of glass on this floor. Next slide. So this is the eastern facing space, but you can see the wraparound terrace on the outside and 13 feet of glass. We have 16 feet, slab to slab. So it's really just a spectacular piece of space at the top of the building. Next slide shows the wraparound terrace. And you can see One Vanderbilt rising there. And the best thing about the positioning of this building is we still get a shot of the Chrysler building as we're looking to the east, based on the fact that we're a block or 2 north of the building. But your views are really unobstructed to the east, to the south, spectacular over Bryant Park as well. We do feel that tenants, as we said, we've had a lot of success leasing space to tenants with outdoor space. We did it at 1155. We mentioned those 4 tenants. At 1133, we brought Take Two Interactive to the building because we had outdoor terraces above the 2nd floor retail spaces, which they took. And in our mixed use building on 31st Street, we secured Nike with a huge outdoor terrace as well at that property. So we can really see terraces playing a big part in our leasing of large blocks. Next slide. So the next property we have is 825 3rd Avenue. 825 3rd Avenue was a building that the Durst built in 1969. Recently, Advanced Publications had a 25-year net lease of the property. At the time, Advanced Publications owned Random House, and it was a Random House building. And talk about long-term relationships. The Durst signed a long-term lease with Random House at 825. Shortly after that, they got them to go to 4 Times Square and signing a lease in 1996. But both of those leases expired 4/30/2019. So 825 literally is the only building in the Durst portfolio that I have not leased a single square foot of space in yet. So we're definitely looking forward to tackling this one. The investment we're making in the building is approximately $140 million capital improvements. It's over $200 a foot in investment in a 550,000 square foot building. We're going to be putting in a loading dock. Above that, we're going to put in a new mechanical plant. All MEP upgrades are costing us over $40 million, just the physical plant. Window replacement, putting in the view glass. We'll show you a slide or two on that momentarily. We'll be painting the facade of the building, putting in new retail space, retail storefronts, modern, replacing the cabs and upgrading the controls, new building security, bathrooms, electrical upgrades, and an amenity floor, which will probably be on the ground floor going to the second floor of the building. We're just wrapping up designs on that. This property is scheduled to be delivered to, I guess, for occupancy in the, call it, second half of 2022. The construction came to a halt because of COVID-19, and we're just ramping it back up. We've reset the schedule, pushed it back a little bit. That's the new dates, which we just gave you. Next slide. So here we have the new retail storefronts. We have the new entrance on 50th Street. Next slide. The lobby of the building, which has been, that's the entrance. The entrance is recessed. It'll continue to be recessed as you go into it. All the finishes are new. Next slide. And Gensler has been the architect who has been advising us on this property. We have the existing travertine walls will be honed. We'll put in new terrazzo floors. The columns there will be clad in concrete. We'll have some type of, seating or furniture in the lobby of the building. Behind the concierge desk are some wood accents. And we have an onyx, which will be a lit onyx desk. You see the turnstiles to the right and to the left. But this whole building will be dramatically different. We're really looking at creating a building that will attract Plaza District tenants to 3rd Avenue. We do expect it to be the sort of the highest end offering on 3rd Avenue in the marketplace today. Next slide. So we have the podium of the building, which is about 220,000 square feet, floors 2 through 11, approximately 20,000 square foot floors. At the top of the podium, we have a wraparound terrace. That wraparound terrace is about 5,000 square feet. We have some mid-rise floors of 11,000 square feet. Tower floors are almost 12,000 square feet, and floors slightly taller at the top of the house. The views at this building are spectacular. The tenants that were occupying this building after Random House, after Advanced Publications sold Random House, were sort of boutique private equity guys, and we're really looking at sort of upgrading some of the tenancies along 3rd Avenue with this property. Next slide. This is the terrace that we can make available to one or more sort of anchor type tenants at the building. If you were looking east, you would see the river. But it's a deep terrace and also just really a nice setback from the neighboring buildings as well. Next slide. Again, the podium floors are about 20,000 square feet. We have nice continuous curtain wall panels. We have about 12-foot ceiling heights, which for Embry Roth buildings built along 3rd Avenue, that's a generous ceiling height. Next slide. This is a shot of a conference room towards the top of the building, but you can see, views all the way down to the Trade Center, Chrysler Building, to even the bridges along the East River. Next slide. This slide shows you the impact that the view glass has. We have tints that go from 1 through 4, and depending on where the sun is at any given time, the windows will automatically tint. What this really allows you to do is unless you want blackout shades for presentations, you have no need for shades throughout the day. So that when that sun is looking right at you, it could be tint 4, but you can look at your computers. It keeps the space cooler, reduces the heat load, but really you have no need for shades, which means you never lose your view. Next slide. We spent a lot of money on the perimeter convectors of the building. To the left would be the old 2.5-foot deep convectors. And to the right, you see a very low profile. That convector comes out about 12 inches. It's also very low to the ground. And we've also put in a chill beam system, which has allowed us to raise the ceiling height because our cooling is right at the perimeter. We don't need the shade pockets either. So you gain glass around the perimeter of the building. So you also gain a dramatic amount of space on the podium of the building. The carpetable area increases by about 1,000 square feet per floor on a 20,000 square foot floor because of the reduced depth of the radiator. Next slide. Your views are spectacular. These are East River shots. We have very low-rise buildings that probably go to the 8th floor to the east of us. So you have these views throughout. You can also see Sven arising in the background there in Queens. Next slide. Another shot towards the top of the house. So we're very excited about 825. And I think what we've done successfully at 151, at 1155, and we hope to do here is to really, by putting our money and spending it the way we have, is really to decommoditize our space. I think that people looking at 151, people looking at 1155 can really see the difference in the buildings, and we're not being necessarily compared to everything else that's on the market. So I think we're leasing at a faster rate. I think we're leasing certainly for higher dollars at these properties. At this building, we will be asking probably $78 a foot in the base of the building, and we'll be asking, call it 84 to high 90s for the top of the house at this building. And we are very excited about bringing this to the marketplace. Next slide. So before we get into Helena maybe addressing Well and Durst, you maybe already addressed this, but in terms of leasing activity,
Sorry, Tom,
one second, Helena. In terms of leasing activity, year to date, the Durst organization has leased about 650,000 square feet. We recently had a Durst manager meeting, and in the notes there, that's about 54% more space than we had leased at this time last year. We also have about 200,000 square feet of leases out. In 2019, we leased just over 1 million square feet, and we are certainly on track to do that again this year. We certainly at least started a little earlier this year than some other years, where you're wrapping all your deals up in the fourth quarter. But we're hopeful that the properties will continue to lease with the activity we had at One World Trade Center downtown. With MDC, we were one of the largest leases downtown. With TikTok, we leased one of the certainly largest leases in Midtown. We also had 120,000 square foot renewal by Mitsubishi at 655 3rd Avenue this year. So fortunately, it's been a busy year, maybe not as busy the last couple of months, except for our closing TikTok. Helena.
No, I think we just wanted to end up on our focus on the amenities and how much the industry has changed even since I started in 01, and the focus on the amenities. So as the changes are happening due to the current events and the impacts of COVID-19, we're really looking to continue to being a good corporate citizen, and in addition to being able to make sure that we are providing the appropriate things for our tenants and our residents, and focusing on our amenities, focusing on food that can be delivered directly to your office, also focusing on how that food can get packaged, limiting the amount of visitors to the spaces, and spending quite a bit of time right now looking at the New York State executive guidelines and the orders as it relates to, as they deem it, responsible parties, which are the managers and owners of commercial buildings. So I know we wanted, I see some Q&A coming up. I don't know, Laura, if you want to ask those questions out loud, and then we can go through it. And these are some more of our pictures of our amenity spaces, which I'm sure many of you had seen. This is in 151, and the photo prior was at One World Trade Center, and we'll be looking to expanding these types of amenity packages to 825 as well as potentially at 1155.
Sure. Thank you, Helena and Tom. That was great. I love these pictures. I love how bright and open the space just looks so lovely. While you were presenting, Ryan Lee was queuing some questions up from the Q&A. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you to ask the first question.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you again, Helena and Tom. That was very helpful, insightful. We unfortunately don't have too much time to get through all these questions, but we can try to cover as many as possible. One was regarding your rent collections over the past few months. Do you mind speaking to how that's been coming in?
I can look at commercial. I think we've been in line with some of the, obviously there are public companies that have to report their collections, and that our office collections have been I'd say consistent with the higher end. So call it in, the 90% numbers. If you factor retail into that, the numbers come down a little bit. We are not big on retail, except retail is, at the base of our buildings. We don't own freestanding retail spaces. So our numbers have been strong and certainly better than we thought going into this. So we are looking at it, and they're pretty consistent from April to May. So now we're looking at June.
And do you have a sense of when your organization is planning on returning to the office? Are you going to go back right when phase 2 reopens, or are you going to take a little slower of an approach there?
We definitely appreciate calling it return to the office rather than return to work, because we've all been working. And so we're looking at right now our return to the office programming. Nobody's going to win an award for returning first. And so we haven't finalized a date, but we're committing, and Tom, this is the first time you're hearing this, that we'll be committing 2 weeks prior to letting everybody know when we'll be doing it. We have a blue and green team, so we'll have a 50% occupancy in all of our offices and our workplaces. So we can maintain the required 6-foot distance And as many of you know, we will be required to keep face masks on in proximity of other individuals.
And can you expand upon some of those additional safeguards and enhanced security measures you're implementing to kind of get everyone comfortable returning and addressing all the COVID concerns? Like, do you have like thermal scanners or programmed your elevators to just allow 2-3 people at a time?
In where it's possible, we're programming elevator where the tenant can go directly to their office space, so avoiding tenants having to share elevators as much as possible, also having it possible so that you can use an app to log in and then ask the elevator to come rather than touching a touch screen. We have provided, we've created all of the required signage as it relates to social distancing. We have put down areas of egress or an entrance into the buildings. We don't, unless required by the government, we do not plan to do thermal scanning or thermometer checks. And as a reminder, there's 2 different guidelines. There's a guideline for commercial buildings, and then there's a guideline for tenants of those commercial buildings. And the tenants, as an employer, we are required to ask that our employees take a thermal test or take their temperature before they come in. And there's 3 required questions, and we're looking to deploy an app to be able to do that.
Got it. And Tom, this one's probably more directed for you, but regarding the TikTok lease, given that those negotiations started pre-COVID, how were those negotiations playing in with everything else that happened? Was there any retrading going on there? Would you mind just expanding upon that process?
Obviously can't talk about any specifics per se, but I think that a tenant growing and signing a lease today was looking for lots of flexibility, especially a tenant, growth, technology tenant. So there were, I'd say the negotiations were dynamic, and they were sort of a moving target in terms of how big they would be, how small, what flexibility they may have, what termination rights they may have. And so I think that there was certainly a lot of discussion in that, and that was very fluid until the lease was signed. But the numbers were consistent with what was negotiated from day one. But there were certainly things that the tenant was really looking for based on signing a lease in this environment that we were able to give them.
Right. And we had another question regarding whether you would consider a life science use for 825 3rd Avenue, even if it meant providing stronger floor loads than 50 pounds per square foot. It's not, I would say maybe not out of the question. We have been looking and thinking about life science for other properties. I mean, frankly, years ago, we thought about life science. We'd actually consider developing the Alexandria site early on. We knocked on our tenants, and of course, Pfizer was one of the first people to lease space at the Alexandria Center. So a lot has changed, but we do have property at 1800 Park where we're looking, we can go residential, mixed use, or commercial, but we think that might be a great location for life sciences, where we have a big floor plate. It could be a 500,000 plus square foot, building with, ground up, lots of flexibility there. So it is something that we are looking at as an expanding, player in the marketplace. And unfortunately, we're short on time here, but I guess for the last question, do you mind providing your opinion on what you sort of attribute to the increase in leasing activity during this first quarter, with TikTok and Facebook, et cetera? Are
you talking about in the marketplace in general?
Yeah.
So obviously last year we came off of a couple of record years. The tech industry really picked up. Obviously Facebook's commitment has been huge. Google's commitment to the city has also been been huge, and getting Apple to commit to a larger presence at the beginning of the year at 11 Penn was a big plus too. I think that the two most watched deals in Midtown have been Facebook 1, TikTok 2. And, you know, despite work from home, statements by Facebook and others, I think that there's still obviously a need for dynamic, if you want dynamic and creative space in Manhattan, I mean, or for your companies. I think that right now, everybody working from home, it's all like we have one arm tied behind our back. We're all equal, but our feeling is, in the long run, that, you know, the companies that return to the office, return to the collaborations, the innovation, and the chance collisions and conversations that happen in the office are going to keep the market going. We're hopeful that Facebook certainly signs as well. I think right now, any leasing activity in New York, whether it's you or your competitor, is good news for all of us. So we are certainly rooting for Vornado and Facebook at the Farley building.
Yeah, and I think we've all experienced this extreme fatigue that's happening doing these video conferences. Somebody who's really smart told me that we gain more information and more energy from other people because we experience other people with our five senses. And when you're experiencing people in delay, and then you're experiencing only one or two of these senses, you have to make up for it. So if you're feeling fatigued, it's true. This is an exhausting experience.
I think listening to me for the last half hour probably was pretty exhausting too.
It was great, Tom. I'm happy to hear you say that, Helena, because yeah, it is definitely a different environment going from Zoom call to Zoom call. So appreciate those comments, and this is a great presentation. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for your time and your efforts putting it together. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, and thanks for letting us go on and on. But 44 slides, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And thank you to all the members out there who joined us today. So we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing you all in the city soon.
Yeah. Next time we'll be over drinks on our Thursday cocktail party. So see you then.
Great. See you then. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.